Well, hey guys, Zockman here, and today I want to show you how to solder XLR connections using Neutrik connectors. My name is Isaac, I'm an audio tech at a church, and I want to show you the church audio life. So I'm going to make videos as I have time, and if you're a church audio tech, you'll understand that. And I also want to make videos as I have projects to do to save the work and to kind of double time there. So today I have to solder some cables to install on a rack mount mixer for our new production room that we're setting up, and I thought I would just show you guys how I'm going to do that. So first I want to talk through the different things you will need. They are all shown here. First of all, you need a decent soldering iron with a fairly narrow tip. You'll need rosin core solder. Some kind of clamp is always good. Needle nose pliers are always handy. Some kind of small cutters. Jacket removers are very handy, and wire strippers are essential. And then of course your Neutrik connector. Now we use Neutrik connectors because they just seem to be the absolute best as far as we've experienced. They have the simplest operation, but they also have some of the sturdiest connection, and they make your work more efficient, but also they last quite a long time. They probably are a touch more expensive than other connectors, but they're well worth the money. So we will always use our Neutrik connectors, love them. Alright, so I got this cable here that needs a male XLR connection, and that's what I'm going to do here today. So, obvious first thing to do is open up the package of the Neutrik bag. And they come with 4 distinct parts. There's always the boot, strain relief, the actual connector piece, and then the steel jack portion. I'm actually not sure what that's exactly called, but anyway, the outside. And these parts come with a bag, and the way these are created, like I said, compared to other companies, really, I think, work the best. So first thing you always want to do, and this is something that can burn you if you don't do it, is put the boot on first. If you forget to do this, you have to then unsolder it and go back and do this. So before I do anything else, I always stick the boot on. And the strain relief actually has a cutout, so it could be done after the fact, but just for my own sake, I put that on now so I don't forget. There we go. I always then stick my connector piece into the jack so it's ready to go, into the clamp, so it's ready to go. And then I'm ready to begin. So first thing you got to do is expose the wires inside the cable. So this is where I said the steel jacket stripper comes in handy. These can be bought fairly easily on Amazon or B&H, AV Shop. That's also where you can buy the Neutrik ends. I've bought them mostly at B&H Photo. They seem to be the cheapest price, but avshop.ca works as well, or Amazon. These can also come with sometimes network connecting kits. But they're just a nice simple way to get the jacket off. And so you want to leave, some people have said basically a thumbnail's length of wire on the end. And these are, I can tell already, a bit uneven, so they have to be trimmed anyway. You don't want too much length. They won't fit in the connector very well and they get more prone to problems. But too short is going to be hard to work with. So this kind of is a bit of a feel. So somewhere, I figure right around your thumbnail length, which is what, I think 3/4 of an inch maybe. So yeah, use a jacket stripper to try to get around that much off. Do only one turnaround. If you do too many, you might cut right into the wires, and you don't want that. Pull the jacket off, just toss that to the side. And the kind of cable I'm using has a little bit of twine inside that was used to probably in the manufacturing process, so just snip that right off. There we go. These also have a bit of a foil, so I separate out the ground wires and I bring out the foil. And sometimes this foil will need to be trimmed with the snips, but sometimes it comes off by hand. And there's a bit more of that twine, so let me just get rid of that carefully. There we go. So if you're soldering XLR or microphone cable, there's always going to be 3 wires. This is how they create a balanced connection. You're always going to have a hot, a cold, and a ground. And these are what you're going to solder to pins 1, 2, and 3. With pin 1 being the ground, pin 2 is going to be white, positive, pin 3 is going to be black or negative. So now you got this state. This is ready to have the cable stripped. Some people would even do these a touch shorter or a touch longer. Somewhere in this ballpark of length is going to be good. But one thing I mentioned earlier is that the ground is a little shorter than the rest, so I'm actually just trim those to be a bit more even. And this isn't rocket surgery. These don't have to be exactly perfectly precise, but somewhere in this general ballpark is going to work really well for you. Okay, then this is where we use the wire strippers. And these can also be purchased online in hardware stores as well. This I know is a 20 gauge wire. So let's find the 20 gauge hole. Pop that in there. Strip that back. And you want to leave about this much in here. Basically, you want them to fit into the boot of the connector without having any extra. I want that rubber to go right up to the boot of that connector to prevent anything from wires from crossing each other at all. So that's about the right amount. Do the same thing on this next one. That one's a little short. Let me try that one more time. Let me strip back just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So what we want to do next is called tinning these wires. And basically what that means is getting some solder to absorb into the stranded wires of these wires. And there's a fairly simple process to do that. Essentially you hold your soldering iron against them and push solder into them. But one thing to note is that the solder itself helps to transfer heat. So for these cables, you could try to stick these into a clamp if you want, but I've gotten comfortable with this enough where I can just rest this in such a way where it's just not going to move too much. Take the soldering iron, and I'll dab just a little bit of solder on the end of this here, just to make sure it's got some. Again, that'll transfer the heat. And then I just literally hold this against the end and push the solder into it, and you'll see the solder literally suck into those wires. You don't need to, it doesn't take long at all if you do this right. So there we go. And they don't need to be glooping, they just need to have just enough so that they're together. And this also will make sure they don't come apart on you as you solder, and that works out very well. So now that we got the wires tinned, we want to also tin the connector on the Neutrik connector. And basically they have 3 cups that you can fill with solder. One thing I was taught here, and I've seen this differently online, but is actually you want to make a hot solder, not a cold solder. And what this means is the method I was taught was that you actually heat up the cup itself and have the heated up cup melt the solder instead of just melting the solder directly into the cup. I think what happens is sometimes you just hear pouring basically hot solder into a cold cup, and sometimes that doesn't actually connect the way it should, doesn't really bind the way it should. But if the cup is hot, it always will. So then what I was taught was, again, add a little bit of solder. I'll clean this off, it's a bit dirty. Add a little bit of solder onto the tip. And then what I was told to do was, and I think this works the best, and this is what I would recommend to everybody else, is hold this under the cup, causing the cup to get hot. Then you put the solder on the top and put it into it, and then it melts into it. And you get a good amount of solder, and then basically fill the cup right up. Don't be stingy with your solder. And I would just keep repeating this process for all 3 cups. So hold it on the bottom, put the solder in. There we go. There we go. Now those are filled up. Next thing to do is relatively simple. Just have to now connect the wires into those cups, and by melting them together again. Now this is where it's important to make sure you get everything in the right order. And if you take a close look at these cups, you'll see that it's pin 1, pin 2, and pin 3. And 1 again is always going to be ground, 2 is always hot or positive, and 3 is always negative or cold. And what you want to do then is take your wires and get them in the right order. Now actually I should have checked that before I did this. I basically flipped around. So what I would do is I would just flip these wires around. And then one important little tip is try to get these bent so that they are more naturally already kind of have some tension going the way you want them to go. And this will make your life a lot easier, as you'll see in a second why. So next thing to do is just simply melt the bottom, put this in until they all melt together. Again, you have a hot solder, not a cold solder. And then that should be good to go. So again, I am right-handed, so I will always go from left to right. That way you're not as much chance of melting your cable or hitting something or even hitting your fingers. So if you're left-handed, you may do the exact opposite. But basically the stuff you want to keep it the most out of your way as possible, so you're less chance of burning yourself or melting a cable. So this is how that goes. There we go. Yep, and you should hold in place until the solder recools. You spin that, so you use it, and sometimes you can use this tension here to get stuff in the right place, twist that around, and then I'll get underneath again. There we go. And then one last time, and sometimes again you have to rebend this just a little bit to get it into place. There we go, and hold it underneath. You know, in this case I need a bit more solder on the bottom as it's not transferring the heat. And I thought there was still some there. There we go, a little glue on the bottom. And then back in business. It should go really fast now. There we go. Beautiful. So that's one of those things that'll make you a lot faster at this. If you always make sure there's some solder on the tip of your soldering iron or already underneath the bottom of that cup, it'll melt faster, it'll go together. So that is effectively now soldered. You just take it out of the clamp, pull it out, and then reassemble it. And the next step is fairly simple. You just take the strain relief, and they actually have a nice way of fitting into the sides there. Not sure if that's super clear. There we go. And then taking the metal outside jacket, pushing that in with the Neutrik label always on top. Then you push this up and screw it together. There you have your completed end. It's together, looks good, super solid. It's got built-in strain relief. And this will be a long-lasting connection that'll last you a long time, providing you soldered it cleanly. All right, hope that helped you. And also I wanted to note that normally in this case, if you were doing just a regular cable, you would now do the female end. In this case, this is an installation where all I need is the male end. So this is exactly the same process. The only difference is that your pin numbers would now be flipped around. So pin 1 and 2 would be on the opposite sides, because now it's going in the other direction. So just be careful about that. Otherwise, it's the exact same procedure. And you can now solder cables for all kinds of installations. You can make adapters. So I think this is a very handy skill to have. And I really hope it helped you in your church audio life or whatever life you live. I actually really enjoy soldering. I think it's one of the fun kind of meditative things you can do. And I hope that you will enjoy it the same way. Well, if you liked this video, I hope you will press the like button or subscribe to my channel. I'm going to make more videos like this, but also videos of like real life reviews, gear that I've actually used in my life as a church audio tech. And I'll give you kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, uncensored, and that might help you in your purchasing decisions. So, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. God bless.